Hi, everyone. Good evening. I am McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas. And I am back on here this evening for another one of our virtual events. We have, as usual, a full calendar of events happening with authors joining us today all over the country, sometimes all over the world. So tonight's event is featuring David Liss in conversation with Anne Perry. As always, if you're interested in more information about the author's books or the authors themselves, or if you would like to order a copy of the book from us, either author's books, I've just dropped a link in the comments on YouTube and on Facebook with more information, a link to our website and how to order. Don't be shy. If you have questions, we'll get to those in the second half of the chat. You can put those in the live chat on YouTube or in the comments on Facebook, and I will see them and be able to pass them along to the authors in the second portion of the event. I want to mention, just because we still get asked if we're open. Yes, we've been open almost a year now, open to the public. We do ask that you wear masks in store. We also are still carrying a very large selection of jigsaw puzzles that we've been carrying since COVID started. I think we've gotten in about 50 new varieties in the past week or so. So if you're a jigsaw puzzle person, you can find those all on our website or come visit us in store. We have a huge selection. We also have a lot of signed books. And in case you missed it, all of our live in-store events that were originally scheduled for the first half of September have been rescheduled to virtual events, including our event with Lisa Jewell. Tomorrow night, she will be on here at 7 o'clock Central. Rather than in store, we're working on a date for William Kent Kruger, tentatively September 21st. And more info on virtual events, reschedules, all of that can be found at murderbooks.com on our event page, as well as our Facebook event listing. Okay, enough out of me. Again, if you have questions, put them in the comments. We'll get to them in a little bit. Let me bring on the first author for this evening, David Liss. Hi, David. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for being here. I'm sorry, especially with you.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. I'm sorry, especially with you being, pretty local, that we didn't do this in person. But I think that we made the right call, and that way anyone who wants to watch it from wherever can watch it. Plus, it's super cool. We're joined by Anne Perry tonight, so that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled about that. That's a real treat for me.
Yeah, me too. So I'm going to do your bio really quickly, and then we'll get Anne on here. David Liss is the author of 14 novels, as well as numerous novellas, short stories, and comics. His previous books include A Conspiracy of Paper, which was named a New York Times notable book and won the 2001 Barry, Macavity, and Edgar Awards. The Coffee Trader was also named a New York Times notable book and was selected by the New York Public Library as one of the year's 25 books to remember. He's also the author of the Middle Grade Randoms series. Many of Liss's novels are currently being developed for television or film. He's worked on numerous comics projects, including Black Panther and Mystery Men for Marvel, the Spider and Green Hornet for Dynamite, and Angelica Tomorrow. He's here today because his brand new book, The Peculiarities, sorry, apparently I can't say that, made it through the whole bio and messed up the book title.
I have trouble with it too. Don't feel bad.
So you're here tonight to talk about that brand new book. We are also joined, as I mentioned, by Anne Perry, who is black on my screen right now, but appears fine in the thumbnail. Let's see. Anne, are you there? I'm going to give it just a second. All right, Anne, if you can hear us, I am going to remove you from the studio, and you just come back in a second. Oh, I think here she is already. Hi, Anne.
Hi.
Hi. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I always tell our audience that my favorite people are the people who are our guest interviewers, because you take the job off of my shoulders. So thank you again for being here. Anne Perry is the New York Times bestselling author of 2 acclaimed series set in Victorian England, the William Monk novels and the Charlotte and Thomas Pitt novels. She's also the author of a series featuring Thomas and Charlotte Pitt's son, Daniel, the Elena Standish series, 5 World War I novels, 19 holiday novels, and a historical novel, The Sheen on the Silk, set in the Byzantine Empire. Anne Perry lives in Los Angeles, and she also has a brand new book out, the Elena Standish book, Darker Reality. So again, for more information, there's a link in the comments. I know this is a big treat for me to get to sit back and watch this conversation tonight. I'm going to go away. I'm going to let you guys chat. If there are any technical issues or anything, I'm right here. I will pop back on. And when it's time for questions, I will also appear when you call on me. Y'all have fun.
Thank you. Well, I enjoyed reading your book so much. It's nice to meet you. It did the most important thing for me to really love a book is it made me think.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's a real compliment to hear from you. I just want to say that when I was working on my first novel, I read through your books and diagrammed them and tried to reverse engineer how you made things work. And so I learned a lot from you by stealing from you and trying to figure out what it is, how you made the magic work. So it's a real thrill for me to be able to talk to you.
Well, it's the greatest gift you can give anybody, I think, is to make them think. Give them something that I hadn't thought of it. I hadn't seen it that way. This is different. And it made me think, and by the way, so I have about 6 or 7. But the people had such strange experiences, and yet you made them very, very real, as if this is.
Anne, I don't know if you can hear me. You've frozen, and I can't hear you. So it sounded like you were building up to a great question, but I just don't know where it went.
Agreed, David. It's not on your end. So I'm going to just step in really quickly, and we're going to have a little intro while we get Anne sorted. Why don't you actually just tell us a little bit about the book before we have an in-depth conversation about it?
Okay. Well, the book is set in 1899 in London, and it's an alternate history, but it branches off from real history about 10 years before the novel begins. And the premise is essentially that as there was in real life in the novel, there's a revival in occult interest in the occult and magic practice in the last quarter of the 19th century. And the premise of this book is that the kinds of real magic that people were actually practicing in real life in that period work. And that was the launching point of how I became interested in the subject, whereas I began to think, what if the kinds of magic that people practiced in the late 19th century in England actually worked and did something, and what would the world look like if that were the case? And I combined that kind of, what we would consider, based on the way magic is often portrayed in popular culture, real world magic is often kind of banal and unimpressive. And I combined that with a lot of truly bizarro happenings around London. So I kind of combined sort of bizarre magic and real world mundane magic. And so I'll try to figure out what would happen if these two things were going on simultaneously.
But it's the change in the people that's the most interesting to me, and I think to a lot of people, real story is about internal change to the people. This character's changes were external as well, but it only symbolized what was happening inside him. And the thing that struck me most, before I get carried away in another line and don't mention it, is, in a way, it's a real love story, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, and as you say, I mean, novels, if novels or any kind of story, any kind of fiction is going to be successful, it has to be about character and how characters change. And so, as you say, the main character of this novel is a guy, Thomas Thresher, who's the younger son in a banking family. Is when the novel begins, he's kind of a self-important dolt. He's a kind of pampered, wealthy person who's never really had to fend for himself, and is now suddenly being forced to work in his family's bank. And he's also undergoing, as you say, a physical transformation. He's very slowly, he knows he's transforming into a tree. And And as you point out, the physical changes he's undergoing prompt him to undergo a lot of personal inner changes.
But aren't we all undergoing changes? Not maybe as obvious as growing leaves.
No, yes, that's right.
If we could meet our 10 years ahead self and 10 years behind self, I hope they would be different. If we're here and we're not changing, we're not learning anything.
No, absolutely right.
Wasted. But I thought it was a very good visualization of change. It made me think. I like that.
Well, thank you. And I didn't, I tend not to dabble around with, obvious symbolism, and I'm not really interested as a writer in heavy-handed metaphor. So I certainly didn't intend for one thing to symbolize the other. But of course, as you well know, characters always have to change in the course of a novel,
They're not.
Or otherwise they're not interesting.
But also, he learned to see, what was it, Esther?
It sounds right. It's actually been so long since I've read the novel.
But I was the only person who forgot her own characters' names. Now, his feelings for her were so enlightening. If only we would look at people that way. In the beginning, he thought, oh, please, I'll be civil, but that's enough. And towards the end, he couldn't see how anybody else could look at her and not see how beautiful she was. Isn't it really that you see the soul of somebody?
No, I don't. I mean, so much of the novel it deals with, of course, all these supernatural happenings, but it also deals with there's a lot of class and culture bias that the character has to engage in. He's been separated from people who are not like himself for most of his life, and as he undergoes this journey in which he's trying to figure out what has happened, what is happening to him, and how can he maybe prevent himself from undergoing this horrifying metamorphosis. He has to interact with lots of different kinds of people from lots of different backgrounds, and as happens in real life, like we tend to, it's very common for people to think of people who are from different walks of life as somehow impossibly alien, but when we get to know them, we realize they're just like us.
Yes, as an alien here, I'm kind of used to being labeled alien on all pieces of paper, and yet I don't feel like it. It took me about 24 hours to acclimatize.
Well, the language is very similar here.
With a few thousand exceptions, yes. You can't spell! You want to try being English?
You just want to throw U's in where they don't belong. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we think they do. But it's fun, and I find people, on the whole, very friendly. But back to the peculiarities. I would like to see more of them. I would like to know how we adapt to them and how they adapt to us and who wins in the end.
Well, that, I certainly wanted to leave the reader wanting more of the world, and this is not a book that ends on any kind of a cliffhanger. It has I think a pretty solid end, but the world has changed over the course of the novel, and certainly the world is different than our world at the beginning.
Have you looked at the world recently, about 2 years ago?
Oh, right. No, and certainly I agree. We live in a world which every couple of years becomes unrecognizable from the world it used to be. So
It's really done itself this time.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's and maybe there's some unintentional metaphor there in when I was writing the book about characters seeing the world change all around them. I might have been kind of influenced by what I'm seeing change around me as well.
And are you going to write a sequel?
I don't have a plan to, but I don't have a plan not to.
Get one. I think there'll be an awful lot of people who want to know more of what you have to say about people and their inner natures and outer natures, and how things can appear to be absolutely obscene and extraordinary and nonsense, and yet there can be a beauty in it if you look for it. It comes from inside, not outside.
And I think that's one of the things that Thomas, my protagonist, realizes is that some of the things he finds initially horrifying and grotesque, he later comes to see in a very different light. There's one family that he interacts with where people have been, by all reasonable standards, just like horrifically transformed, but he comes to feel very affectionate and tender toward these people who are perhaps, when he doesn't deserve it, extremely kind to him.
Is there anything more important to say than look for the good in people who seem to be different?
Oh, yeah, and then again, that's one of the things he has to discover, as you well know, that in Victorian England, that people often saw these kinds of divides either by ethnicity or by race.
Not enough to know that.
But they saw these divides as
Yes.
impossible to cross, and in fact, as we all know as human beings, they're not so difficult at all.
Yes, well, the 2 world wars taught us a lot. Everybody bleeds the same sort of way.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And when they came back from the trenches, there were some surprises, good ones, bad ones, but they all understood much the same experience. And it also, then of course, we suddenly could allow women to vote and all kinds of things. Change is frightening.
Oh, for sure.
It's to see it at all, but it's also exciting and an opportunity. I wish you would do a sequel, and as many as you feel inclined to do, because you've left these people having to adjust to something they can't change. But some people don't adjust. I mean, look around us and we find people who cannot adjust and will not adjust. They want to stick everything in aspic and keep it exactly as it is.
Yeah, and that is the movement of the novel, I think, because at the beginning of the story, the kinds of changes that people are undergoing are only semi-public. There's a lot of denial about what's happening. People, there are all kinds of different metamorphoses that people are undergoing in the world of this novel. Some people, like my main character, are turning into trees, and others are turning into other kinds of creatures, or parts of their bodies are changing. And most of the time, people are keeping it hidden. They lock themselves away, and they don't want the world to see them. And over the course of the novel, these things become a little bit more public. And by the end, you're looking at a world in which these kinds of transformations and changes may no longer be hidden.
But that's so true to when we feel ourselves being out of step. We try to look as if we're in step, until we suddenly realize something happens to make us realize it's not unacceptable. There are other people who also are changing and growing all the time. And it may be a good change, it may be bad, but sometimes they can't help it, and sometimes they do. Or it's for tolerance, really, isn't it? For looking for the good.
Well, it's tolerance, and it's also just what we're willing to accept about the world and what we're willing to accept about ourselves and how we see things. There's a scene in the novel that was actually one of my favorite scenes to write, where Thomas, who is really at the very beginning of his transformation, every once in a while, every couple of days, a leaf will grow on his skin, and he plucks it off and hides it away, but he's not, he can hide what he's becoming, and he knows he'll be able to hide it for some time. But there's a scene around the middle of the novel where he meets somebody who is very far along over the course of this metamorphosis, and has almost lost his humanity, has almost become entirely a tree, and is sort of frozen in place, and is losing his ability to move and to communicate. But this character can still speak, and he talks about how wonderful the change is, and how much how at peace he is, and how this is, without knowing it, what he's always wanted. And that was something I threw in deliberately, because I think, as you say, when change is often difficult, but sometimes those changes bring things that, we might not have ever imagined. And I'm certainly not advocating anybody in the audience become a tree. I don't know that it would actually be all that great, but this character seemed to like it.
But isn't it symbolic of all change, though, rather than specifically a human being into a tree, which is a change he's got to accept, because it's going to happen whether he does or not. He can make it easily, or he can make it more difficult.
Well, that's true, but some change is terrible, and some change is hard, and some change is not something to embrace. And in fact, in that scene, I really wanted the reader to wonder whether what's happening to this character is something that's pleasant and enjoyable and wonderful, or if just if he's basically gone mad, if he doesn't know the difference between what he should embrace and what he should be fearful of. And we just, of course, never know what's going on inside someone's head. But I think, change can be good, but change can also be terrifying.
And it can be both.
Yeah.
It's bad. I mean, as you grow older or become ill, chronically ill, you have to adapt to changes. And I watched my mother didn't really become ill. She was taken suddenly. But it's my stepfather, watching him over the years. He was injured in the war, and, the adaptations we have to make.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not only not helping ourselves, but neither are we helping all those who care about us and have to deal with us if we kick and scream all the way and complain about everything. There's an awful lot of philosophy to be drawn from your story. It's bigger than just this happened and then that happened.
Well, thank you, but I think anytime you have characters who are undergoing difficult situations and psychological change and stress and challenges, there's always philosophy to be drawn from that. I think the kinds of questions that any kind of good story in any kind of medium or any kind of genre, the kinds of questions these stories grapple with are the big ones, and they're the ones that any kind of philosophy is also going to grapple with.
Surely one of the great arts of story is to see what changes happen to people and what makes the change, and how an incident will change different people in different ways. That's what story is all about. It's very exciting. I wouldn't get this, would you?
I agree. I always, when I'm at the outlining phase of a novel, I always, one of the first things I start to work on is, who are my characters and how are they going to change over the course of the story? And that's always for me the backbone of where the story begins. And of course, I change my mind 1,000 times as I'm writing it, but
naturally, yes.
But I still need that backbone.
Do you have to supply your publishers with an outline?
My agent demands an outline of me because he doesn't trust any of the authors he works with. He wants to make sure we're not wasting our time and his. But not my publishers. I usually just run off and do what I want and hope somebody wants to hear what I have to say. But I also don't work in an established series, and so there's very few expectations on me when I start a book. It's just what I want to do.
I have to submit now a sort of 10, 12, 15 page single-spaced outline.
And does that help you with the book?
Yes, it does.
I would think so.
I was kicking against it. I think I wouldn't choose a public place to say so. But no, I have to do it or I don't get paid. And, I need to live. I am finding that the need to produce one that is acceptable to my publisher, and that means I can't change it radically. I can improve it as I go along, but I can't just do an about turn 90 degrees or whatever. And yes, I find it's very helpful to get that sorted out, because I find out where the omissions are in plotline.
No, I would think so. I outline my books, but I don't like outlining. I don't enjoy it at all. I find it really stressful and difficult. And so as soon as I feel like, okay, I'm ready to start this book, I jump in and I know that I'm going to change a lot of things along the way. But I do think it would be useful if somebody forced me to write a proper outline.
Yes. Well, I find it useful. Yes, because whilst I'm just doing an outline, it's going to be the best book I ever wrote, and I haven't actually written word one yet. That's when the difficulty comes, when you've actually got to make it appeal. It's not, I think I will, but here you are, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Much tighter discipline. But when I've got it just in outline, I think it's the best book I've ever done, or I'm about to do. Might not be, of course.
Well, that's a good attitude to have going into the book. You certainly don't want to, be dreading it or thinking, no, this is not going to be so great. But if you're excited about it, it's going to make it a better book, I think.
One of my problems at the moment is writing the Elena series, which is set in the 1930s. And I can watch what's happening, and very much of it's the same. But history's going a bit too fast for me. I can't catch up with the changes. And we are mirroring the 30s in terrible ways.
Oh yeah, no, I can see how that would be a little disconcerting.
I read a very powerful political speech by a British Prime Minister, and he was saying how doomed we were if we didn't look after the Navy and keep it well supplied and well trained and all the rest of it. And we were standing on the brink of terrible things. And I thought, oh, that must be Churchill in World War II. And it wasn't. And I thought, oh, well, it's Lloyd George in World War I. And it wasn't. It was William Pitt the Younger in the Napoleonic Wars, which shows how much we don't learn.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, it's these things definitely come in cycles, and unfortunately, and I think we're in a bad part of the cycle right now.
Yes, let's hope we do better than last time.
I think that's something worth hoping for.
But have you got any particular period you'd love to write about, but people tell you no?
Again, like for better or worse, nobody tells me what I can or can't do. But that also means I've written some books I've been unable to sell.
They didn't tell me I couldn't do it when they should have done.
But they're
unallowed, just unable.
I don't know that there are any periods I am dying to write about that I haven't. My training is as an 18th centuryist, and so that's a period that calls me back every few books. I love the 18th century, and it's the period I feel most comfortable in. And writing a book like The Peculiarities, which is set in a very different time, is always challenging for me because I have to learn a completely new culture.
You rose to the challenge, didn't you?
Pardon me?
You rose to the challenge.
Oh, well, thank you.
And there are ways in which it's timeless anyway.
For me, one of the more interesting things about this book was it was the first time I'd written a historical novel where I could look at photographs of some of the real world characters who are in the books, or look at photographs of the places that are in the novel, which I'd never had before, because everything I'd worked on before this book had been pre-photography. And so that was really remarkable for me to, there were some like very specific locations that I was doing research on and came across photographs of them. And I thought, wow, this technology of photography is pretty innovative. I'm glad we have that now.
Well, again, I think. No, he's gone. There he is. Sorry. Now, I like street scenes in photographs because they can tell me all kinds of things. Clothes people are wearing, hats, how they've changed, length of skirt, what's in a shop window, what the street lighting is there a gutter or not? And you can get masses of things from photograph. One of my favorite periods, and I've written one book, which I don't think oh yeah, I think that all revolutions wind up eating themselves, so to speak, being overtaken by something even more extreme.
You faded out for a second, so I didn't get to hear what this period was.
French Revolution.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I think there's some incredible characters there, people you couldn't possibly invent. I mean, who could invent somebody like Robespierre?
So I get intimidated writing about periods that people actually care about, because there's so much material to wade through that you could spend the rest of your life doing research and never quite catch up. I'm so used to writing about periods that nobody knows and nobody cares about. When you write about things like the origins of futures trading in 17th century Amsterdam, there are very few people who are going to be able to tell you that you're wrong. But if you write about the French Revolution, there'll be lots of people who will find the slightest error you make. Anne, I think we've lost you again. There you are.
Yes, right. What was I saying? Something about the French Revolution. You couldn't make up characters like the real people. It was
definitely true.
And another period I would like to write about, and again I'm told nobody's interested, is the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition in the 1490s. I remember reading about one scene with a real person, Torquemada, who was head of the Inquisition, and he was writing late at night, and the hot wax from the candle fell on his hand, and he didn't notice. Now that kind of obsession is terrifying.
Yeah, I would notice. You would hear me yelp.
Yes, it's interesting because to me the Inquisition was got to be right to save your soul. I think most of us, if we were certain we had a soul, would say that. But let me choose. Don't you choose for me. But it's very frightening, that crusading thing. We do it politically as well as religiously. You will believe what I believe for your own good, and I'm going to make sure you do. I'm saving you.
Yeah, you're breaking up a bit again, Anne. So I think that's why McKenna has popped back in. Hello, McKenna.
Hello. Well, I wanted to give Anne a chance to talk about her new book and the Elena Standish series just a little bit. Why don't we get Anne started on that and see how the connection goes? And then we do have some questions, so we'll get to those questions also. But Anne, why don't you try telling us a little bit about your brand new book out this week?
Do you want to see it?
I would love to. Yes, beautiful. I mean, I just saw it this afternoon at the store, but I'm glad you can hold it up for everyone here.
Well, it's in the Elena Standish series. It's when she goes to America with her parents to visit her mother's parents, her grandparents. She's not met them more in passing, so she doesn't really know them. And they're having their 60th wedding anniversary with a big party with all sorts of people there. It's 34, I think, early in 34. And Roosevelt has just been re-elected, and he's there with Eleanor. And she meets a woman that she finds a very attractive personality, and learns that this woman knows something about atomic fusion and has something to say, but she gets murdered in the car park of the mansion of her, Elena's grandparents. And of course, everybody has to be questioned. And it looks as if they're suspicious of her grandfather. And then the next day they are, and they decide that he is the one who's guilty, and he's taken away. And Elena spends a good deal of the time trying to prove her grandfather's innocence, which finally she does. And that's when the real trouble starts.
Okay, excellent. Well, we do have some questions. We have questions for both of you, actually. So we're going to start with a question. So essentially, one of the people watching loves your Benjamin Weaver books, David, and was wondering if you have plans for writing another series.
No, I feel like I've done what I wanted to do with that character. I wrote 3 novels with that character as a protagonist. And I never really thought of it as a series. They're 3 standalone novels that have the same protagonist, and I never really, at least to this point, I haven't felt the urge to go back and do any more of them. I might wake up tomorrow and feel like that's the thing I want to do, but for the moment, at least, there are other things that are calling me, and but I reserve the right to change my mind at any time.
Fair enough. The same person was wondering, Anne, how many books are you planning in the Elena Standish series? Because he's loving them.
Oh, good. Well, I'm not planning to finish them. It just depends how long I go on. But I've got one I really very much want to write. It's putting Elena in the worst possible position because she's very close to her dead brother, as you know, and members from his regiment are planning to assassinate the Duke of Windsor because they believe he was a traitor. And she has to stop it from happening, but also stop them from getting caught. And that's almost as important to her because, you know, when you've lost somebody in a war, the people who fought beside them have a special meaning for you.
Right.
And I'm not anywhere near that one yet. And I would like to go on until war, but we'll see what happens. If I do one a year, I've still got lots to go. And I don't know how many years I've got to go.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. I'm sure we all want those books to keep coming. So David, this question's shorter so I can pop it on the screen. Where did you get your inspiration for this book?
So I've always been interested in magic as it was actually practiced by real people who really lived and who believed that what they were doing was effective in some way. So I've written about real world magic before, and I've been reading about it for years. And so I'd always wanted to write about this period with the origin of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was this society of magicians in late 19th century England, who were hugely influential. There are still lots of people who practice Golden Dawn style magic today. And so I'd always wanted to write about the Golden Dawn, and that was really the origin of this book. I was just trying to come up with ways I could approach writing about them. And as I said at the beginning, what I thought would be interesting would be to combine this sort of very, again, banal style of magic in which you're mostly meditating or trying to do astral projection or doing demonic summoning, which it tends to be extremely impressionistic. I think I saw something move in the fire. Surely that was a demon. If you could combine that kind of sort of unimpressive magic with something far more bizarre and spectacular. And one of the things that goes on in this novel is there's an ongoing issue of women giving birth to rabbits. And this actually goes back to a real story that's always fascinated me from the early 18th century about a woman named Mary Tofts who claimed to have given birth to rabbits. And the doctors, many doctors at the time, and this is 50 years before the American Revolution. It's not ancient history, but many doctors at the time said, women giving birth to rabbits, it's a possibility. Who knows? We don't know how these things work. And so that story was something that had always stuck with me. And so when I started working on this, I said, I don't know what's going to happen in this book, but rabbit births are definitely something I want.
Sorry, I was trying to, there's a book that came out, I was going to put it in the comments. There was a book that came out, I think from Random House or maybe Knopf last year that was all about that. It was about that woman. Did you see that book or read that book?
I didn't, but there have been other books about her. There's no way that there can be a real story about a woman claiming to give birth to rabbits and not have lots of people just like us fascinated by it. Because if you like story, you're gonna be hooked by that one.
Yeah, there was a major release last year that was an indie darling about it, and I was trying to remember what it was called. So I was searching for that title for if people wanted to read more about it. So we have another question for Anne. Will there be more monk books?
I don't plan any at the moment. Monk's characters, or the characters that feature in Monk's stories, sometimes come into the Christmas novellas. I'm now writing the Christmas novella for not this year, but next year. And the main characters are Scuff, the little boy he adopted who was a mudlark, and Crow, who now is a qualified doctor. But
I love those Christmas novellas. I love them because they're always the peripheral characters. So it's
always the peripheral characters from Pitt or Monk.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question.
This year's is Gracie.
Oh,
Married,
wonderful.
got 3 children.
Yeah.
And her little daughter, who's about 6 or 7, says, "Why are we celebrating the birth of another little boy?" She's got 2 smaller brothers. She says, "We've got enough little boys."
Great.
And it has to be explained to her. This one was special.
Excellent. Okay. So David, another question for you. What do you hope the reader comes away with after reading this book?
A sense of being hugely entertained. No, I'm not moralistic or, I'm less. The only real experience I'm hoping for from my readers is that they find the story interesting and they want to turn the pages. I mean, obviously, I hope that people find the material interesting. The sort of the background of the world of the occult in the late 19th century, but more importantly, I hope the reader finds the stories and the characters interesting. I think, again, any good story is going to, if you're interested in it, if you care about the characters, if you care about the challenges they go through, you're going to end up thinking about them afterwards and mulling it over, and hopefully every reader will have their own experience. But I'm not particularly didactic in my writing. I'm not trying to create a particular kind of experience for the reader. I'm more of a wouldn't it be fun if this character had this kind of experience and we got to see how he or she met with the challenge.
Right. Okay. Another question for Anne. I'm just alternating, and we've got a couple for both of you. I'll end on. Anne, is there one of your characters that you would like to revisit?
You mean one that I've sort of finished with and I would like to go back?
I think so.
The one that comes to mind is Victor Narroway. I didn't get to know him very well early enough because I didn't know he was going to be important.
Okay. So from the same person, where would each of you recommend, which would each of you recommend is your strongest work for a new reader as an entry point? How about we start with you, David?
I've written so many different kinds of books in so many different settings. I would say, that readers should just read the back copy and see what appeals to them. Right now, I would say the best place to start is the peculiarities, because I want as many readers as possible for my newest work. But I've written historical thrillers. I've written things that are closer to genre mystery. I've written historical fantasy. I've done middle grade science fiction. I've done contemporary crime. So I'm not prepared. Books aren't like children. It's hard to say which one's your favorite. So I leave it to the reader. But read the new one.
We get the new one. How about you, Anne?
I think probably the best one really to start with is the first Monk. It's called Face of a Stranger, where Monk wakes up in what he thinks is the workhouse. Then he realizes it's daylight and the people are still in bed, so it must be a hospital. And he's hurt, but not ill. And one of the nurses comes over to him, male nurses, of course, were just after the Crimean War, and says, you better straighten yourself up, the police want to see you. And he gives Monk a looking glass, and Monk looks at it. Who the hell is that? He has absolutely no idea why the police are interested in him, or who he is, or what happened to him, or anything else. It's called Face of a Stranger.
Yep. And it's wonderful. And we still recommend that to this day. Is a great place to dive into Anne Perry books. All right. So one of our regular viewers asks this question with some variety every night. So tonight she's got an extra little kick to it. But I love asking it. I've stolen it from her. She's here watching tonight. What 3 fictional characters of any time would you invite to a dinner party if Stephen King were the live guest? So Stephen King's there, and you got to add 3 fictional characters to a dinner party. How about we start with you, David?
Oh, come on. I need some time to work on this.
Well, if Anne has an answer, she can jump in. Whoever has an answer.
I think HM. Now I've got to think of who wrote them again. He goes by two different names. Help me, somebody. He was American, but he writes the most perfect English people. So Henry Merriweather was his main character.
Henry Merriweather. I'm looking it up. I'm going to lose my mystery bookseller card on this, aren't I?
I should know, but I go to say something, it's there, and then it's not. But Sir Henry Merriweather is certainly one I think for a real live person, you could get G.K. Chesterton.
Yeah.
Which is a fictional character. Yeah.
All right. And let's see. How about you, David, while I look up who wrote these for...
Yeah, I'm having a hard time summoning too many fictional characters because my mind keeps going to actual writers. So I'm just going to lean into that. I'm going to say I want Henry Fielding, John Milton, and my one fictional character will be James T. Kirk. That's the dinner party I want to go to.
All men.
Oh, well, fair enough, but yeah, again, I'm an 18th centuryist. There's kind of a masculine world.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. I think
I would pick one of my own characters. I would like Lady Vespasian there.
Oh, I love her. I would put her in a dinner party anytime too. Yeah, absolutely.
And another one, maybe Father Brown.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got Chesterton, so you've...
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Chesterton was real, so you can't have him.
Okay. So I think that we've done it. I think that we have discussed all the things. I want to mention again that there's a link in the comments for more information about both authors' books, the authors themselves, and should you be inclined to order. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Anne, for being our guest interviewer tonight. Thank you, David. Congratulations to both of you on your new books. And I am going to sign us all off for the evening. Everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. And thank you both for doing this. It was great meeting you, Anne. Great seeing you again, McKenna.
Good to see you again, too. Good to see you as well, Anne. All best to both of you. I'm going to say good night.
Good night.
Good night.